Picture this. It's 1947. India becomes independent. And pretty much the entire world is holding its breath, just waiting for this brand new country to completely fall apart. I mean, it was a place of unbelievable diversity, crushing poverty, and really deep divisions. Almost every expert predicted it would collapse. But it didn't. So in this explainer, we're going to try and solve that impossible puzzle. How did India survive?
I mean, just listen to this prediction from Winston Churchill. And believe me, he was not alone. The general feeling around the globe was that without the British Empire holding everything together, India would just shatter into 1,000 little pieces and sink back into chaos. This wasn't just a casual opinion either. This was what the most powerful and influential people in the world truly believed. The stakes were incredibly high.
So that's the big mystery we're really digging into today. You had famous writers like Rudyard Kipling, powerful world leaders like Churchill, and even the smartest academics, all of them saying the exact same thing. India is an impossible country. It just cannot last. And yet, here we are. So how and why were they all so spectacularly wrong?
Okay, so to really get why they were wrong, we first have to understand why their pessimism made so much sense back then. Let's take a look at the powerful case for India's collapse and why so many people called it an unnatural nation.
This quote from a top British official, Sir John Strachey, really gets to the heart of it. This wasn't just trash talk. It was a fundamental belief of the British Empire. They argued that India was just a name on a map, kind of like Europe. To them, someone from Punjab was as different from a person from Bengal as, say, a Spaniard is from a Swede. In their view, there was no single Indian identity to build a country on.
And you know, it wasn't just the politicians saying this. All the academic theories at the time had a pretty clear checklist for a successful democracy. You needed a wealthy, educated population with a strong, unified culture. Well, India had none of that. It was poor, mostly illiterate, and incredibly diverse. So, by all the rules of political science, it should have become a dictatorship. The fact that it survived as a democracy makes it a total anomaly, a huge outlier that basically breaks all the models.
So if you think of India as a new building, its foundations seem to have 4 massive cracks running right through it from the very first day. The author of our source material, Ramachandra Guha, calls these the main axes of conflict, the fault lines that everyone expected would just tear the country apart. First, you've got caste, this ancient, rigid social hierarchy that decided your place in society from birth. Then, language. We're not just talking about accents, but dozens of completely different languages, each with its own history and alphabet. Third, religion. After the violent partition with Pakistan, India was still home to huge populations of Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, all with a history of conflict. And finally, class. You had princes with unbelievable riches living next to hundreds of millions of people in extreme poverty. I mean, that's a classic recipe for revolution. Any one of these divisions could break a country. India had all 4. So, with all of these forces pulling it apart, what was the glue that held India together? Well, it turns out the founders of modern India had a few really powerful, even radical ideas that completely defied all those predictions of doom. Okay, look at this number. 176 million. What do you think that is? That was the number of people eligible to vote in India's very first general election, way back in 1952. Just think about the scale of that. Most of them were poor, and the vast majority couldn't read or write.
This election was literally called the biggest gamble in history. The whole world was watching, pretty much expecting it to be a complete disaster. But it worked. Villagers stood in lines for miles, Brahmins and former untouchables standing in the very same queue, all to cast their vote. This was the first piece of the glue, a radical, all-in commitment to democracy. It gave every single person, no matter their caste, their religion, or their bank account, a real stake in the new nation. It was their country now.
The second crucial ingredient was the choice to build a secular state. Now, after the absolute trauma of a partition based on religion, India's leaders could have easily created a Hindu Pakistan, a nation just for the Hindu majority. Instead, they made an incredibly bold choice. By declaring that the government would stay neutral on religion, they sent a powerful message. Your rights come from being an Indian citizen, not from your faith. And that promise was essential for convincing millions of Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians that they had a future in this new country.
And look, this didn't just happen by accident. It was the result of some amazing foresight from India's founding architects, leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and B.R. Ambedkar. They worked tirelessly to create a constitution and build the institutions, Things like an independent court system, a free press, and a professional civil service that could act as shock absorbers for all the pressure the new country was under.
But let's be clear, this isn't some simple fairy tale. While India did survive, its democracy has been a messy, complicated, and often flawed reality. The author suggests that if you ask whether it's a proper democracy, the most honest answer you'll get is, well, it's kind of 50-50. See, over the decades, the way Indian democracy works has kind of shifted. It started out as what you might call a constitutional democracy, where laws were made through careful, reasoned debate in parliament. But over time, it's moved more towards a populist democracy. And the difference is, instead of policy getting decided by arguments and facts, now political battles are often fought out on the streets, fueled by mass protests and the hero worship of powerful, charismatic leaders. It's become less about debate and more about spectacle.
This quote from a famous Indian comic actor, Johnny Walker, just sums it all up perfectly. Is India a true democracy? Boss, 50-50. It mostly is when it comes to things like holding elections and allowing free speech. But it mostly isn't when you look at how corrupt many politicians are or how political parties are often treated like family businesses. It's this strange mix of incredible success and really frustrating failure.
So, after weighing all the good and the bad, what's the final verdict here? What is the real success story of modern India that maybe everyone is missing?
The answer is actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. Today, we're always hearing about India's booming economy, its tech industry, right? But the author argues that's not the main event. India's greatest, most incredible achievement isn't economic at all. It's political.
Let's just end with the author's own words, because they say it best. The simple fact that a country this poor, this divided, and this diverse is still a single nation, and still a democracy after more than 70 years, that is the true miracle. That's the story that, against all odds, really demands our attention.
The Indian experiment was never supposed to work. It defied history, logic, and every political theory you can think of. And while its democracy is messy and it's imperfect, its survival remains one of the great stories of the modern world. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. What lessons can all of us learn from this impossible puzzle?